Hi and welcome back. In this video we'll be looking at adjectives, words that help us describe the qualities of things. It's hard to say much using only nouns and pronouns. We can say Simon is a father, but what kind of father is he? We can say the king is a man, but what kind of man or what kind of king? An adjective modifies, that is, describes, a nominal. Simon is a good father. Good is the adjective, telling us more about modifying the father. The king is an old man. Old is an adjective, modifying man, telling us more about what the man is like. If you can use nouns and pronouns, then you can use adjectives, because they share the same endings, so there's very little new to learn here. Most adjectives have different forms for each gender. So, like third-person personal pronouns, in the masculine they use second declension endings, in the feminine they use first declension endings, and in the neuter they use second declension endings again. And so a dictionary will give you the three endings when it gives you the word. Kalos, which means good or beautiful, is usually listed in the dictionary as kalos, comma, a, comma, on. And that's a shorthand way of listing kalos, kalei, kalon. It's assumed that the feminine and neuter endings are stuck on the stem of kalos, right where the os ending would be dropped off. So here are the case forms of kalos, good. And again, this should be purely review. There's absolutely nothing new here. In the masculine forms, we find second declension endings, kalos, kalou in the genitive, kale in the vocative, and then in the plural, kaloi, kalon, and kaloi. For the feminine forms, we use the first declension endings, kale, kales, kale, and the plural kalai, kalon, kalai. And in the neuter, we use second declension endings in the singular kalon, kalou, and kalon, and in the plural kala, kalon, and kala. How do we know, though, which nominal an adjective is describing? Well, in English, we use word order for this. The adjective comes right before the nominal. So, if I want to say that a person is bad, I put the adjective bad immediately before the nominal person, and then I know that bad is describing that person. But what about Greek, where word order is flexible? Here, bad, kakos, can come after the noun it's modifying, anthropos. On the other hand, kale, good or beautiful, can come before the gune, woman it's describing. So where word order is flexible like this, it can't serve to show us which adjective modifies which noun. Instead, we use agreement. An adjective agrees with the nominal it modifies. That means it appears in the same gender, the same case, and usually the same number. So we can see here that kakos probably modifies anthropos because they're both nominative, they're both masculine, and they're both singular. Similarly, kale, we can see that it modifies gune because it's feminine, nominative, singular, just like gune is. Here we have an oikos, and the oikos is being modified by a genitive, huiou, and then we have agathou, the adjective agathos. Well, is it saying that the house is good? No, because agathou is in the genitive case, so it has to be modifying a genitive nominal, huiou. So it's not a good house that belongs to the son, it's a house that belongs to the son who is good, or the good son. Similarly, here we have a verbless clause, huios mu agathos teknon. And so is it the son, my son, that is agathos, good? Or is it the child, teknon, that is agathos, good? Well, in this case, agathos agrees in gender with huios, right? Agathos is masculine nominative singular, and so is huios. So we know that it's the good son, my good son, who is a child, teknon. On the other hand, if we changed the gender of agathos and made it agathon, then we would know that agathon was modifying the neuter teknon, because they both share the same gender, case, and number. So now the sentence would be, my son is a good child. Normal adjectives keep their first or second declension endings even when they modify third declension nominals. So here we have city, polis, in the genitive form poleos. And if we want to say that this woman, hautehi gune, is from the city, we say she is poleos, using the genitive of origin or source. And if we want to say she is from the good city, we have to put agathes in the same gender, number, and case. So agathes here is feminine. It's genitive now because poleos is genitive, and it's singular. But we've used the first declension ending on agathes, even though we're modifying the third declension genitive poleos. Now, positioning adjectives can be a little bit tricky. First of all, there's what we call attributive position. And this is positioning the adjective so that we know it's directly modifying its nominal. We do this either by placing the adjective between the nominal and its article, or by repeating the article in front of the adjective. Okay, so let's look at an example here. We have here ha monos theos. Not only does monos agree with theos, but it comes between the article ha and its nominal theos. And so we know that this is directly modifying theos. This is not God is only or alone. This is the only God. And then we continue to look for another nominative to be the complement, pater. So we're saying the only God is pater mu, my father. Similarly, if we have ho theos and the adjective isn't in between there, but we still want to make sure that we say it's the only God, not God is an only father or something like that. We want to make sure that monos sticks closely with theos. We just repeat the article here. We have ha theos, ha, and now we know monos is going to go with theos. The God, the only one, which we would just translate, again, the only God. And that all is the subject. The only God is pater mu, is my father. Now, this is only possible with definite nominals that have a definite article. And we want to be careful of proper nouns, names, because a proper noun like Simone is implicitly definite. In other words, we treat them as if they have an article in front, even if they don't, because a name by its very nature points to a particular person, place, or thing. So if we see Simone ha Plutos, we have to treat that as if it were ha Simone ha Plutos. And we would be saying, this is wealthy Simon. The Simon, the wealthy one. Wealthy Simon is pater mu, is my father. Now, we've talked before about the fact that in Greek, word order is usually quite fluid, but we've already seen that there are a few exceptions to that, places where we need to be careful of word order. Another of these places is when we're using attributive adjectives. Generally, adjectives will modify the closest valid nominal either before or after the adjective. And by valid, I mean the closest one that agrees in case, gender, and number with the adjective. So, if we wanted to say the father is a wealthy man, we wouldn't put aner at the beginning of the sentence and plutos, wealthy, at the end of the sentence. Why? Well, because there's another noun, hapater, in between them, and that noun, hapater, also agrees in case, gender, and number with plutos. So the most natural assumption would be that plutos is modifying hapater, in which case the most natural reading of this sentence would be the wealthy father is a man. But that's not what we want to say. So we're going to have to rearrange the word order so that plutos isn't on the other side of hapater from the word it's supposed to be modifying, aner. Here are two good examples of how this word order works. We can either say aner plutos is hapater, aner plutos hapater, and now that does mean the father is a wealthy man. Hapater is the subject, and although plutos could be taken with hapater, because plutos is actually between the two nouns, at least it is beside aner. Hapater isn't between the aner and plutos anymore. So it might not be as clear as it could be. There's still some ambiguity about which noun plutos is going to modify, the one before it or the one after, but it's at least acceptable word order. The next example is even clearer. Gune hageton plute. Now it's clearer, even though here plute, the adjective, is quite a ways away from gune. In fact, we've got another noun, hageton, in between. Why is this clear? Well, because in this case, plute agrees with gune. They're both nominative, feminine, singular, while hageton is masculine. So plute can't modify hageton. They don't agree in gender. That means we have to keep looking around the sentence for something that does agree with plute, and we find gune. So you'll see in examples like this, sometimes the adjective can be quite a ways away from the noun it's modifying. The key is that when you put it far away like that, you can't make it ambiguous what noun is supposed to be modified by the adjective. So if there are multiple words in the sentence that agree in case, gender, and number with the adjective, make sure that the adjective is next to the one that you want it to modify. It doesn't have to be necessarily before or after. It can be either, but it needs to be close to the one that you want it to modify, or else people are going to take that adjective with the wrong noun. That was attributive position. In other words, positioning the adjective so that it's very clear that you're attributing the adjective's quality directly to the nominal. There's also what's called predicate position, and this is where you're trying to make it clear by the position of the adjective that the adjective is actually the predicate complement of a verbless clause. So here, one way of doing this with a definite nominal is by making sure that the adjective does not come between the article and its nominal. Hethugater is kale. Hethugater kale, Well, kale isn't in between he and thugeter, so there's no reason to think it's modifying thugeter directly. There's every reason to think it's the complement. The daughter is beautiful. Similarly, we could say kale he thugeter. We can put the adjective out front. But the meaning would still be the same because the kale doesn't come between he and thugeter. So it's probably the complement. The daughter is kale, is beautiful. We also, in neither case, have repeated the article he in front of kale. If we said he thugeter he kale, then we would be taking that all as one phrase. The beautiful daughter is, and we would be looking for something else to be the complement. But this is not a certain matter, because while attributive position definitely shows that the adjective is being used attributively, predicate position just shows that it may not be used attributively. But he thugeter kale could still mean the beautiful daughter. So we have to look in a verbless clause for other signs that the adjective might be a predicate complement. If it's not in attributive position, one of the two attributive positions we described, then we also ask, is there a verb in the clause? Well, if there is a verb in the clause, then the adjective isn't going to be the predicate of a verbless clause, right? Or is there another nominal in the nominative case in the clause? If there is, then that is probably the complement rather than the adjective. There's some interpretation involved, and sometimes you can take a sentence more than one way, and that's the kind of discussion we see sometimes in the commentaries. Is this adjective attributive or is it predicate? But 90% of the time it's fairly clear from context. Here's an example of an adjective which is fairly far from the nominal that it modifies. Apollonios is, that's supplied because we've decided this is a verbless clause, kakou hahuios genu. All right, we see if we're going to interpret this sentence, we begin by looking for the nominative words, and we see that Apollonius is nominative and hahuios is nominative. So the basic idea here is going to be Apollonios is hahuios. Apollonius is the sun. Now, we look at genitive words, and we see genu following hahuios, so it's probably modifying hahuios. So it's probably Apollonios is the son of a people. Now, we still haven't done anything with the adjective kakou. But if we look around, kakou can only modify genu, can't it? Because genu is the only other genitive nominal in the sentence. So, in a situation like this, even though the adjective is fairly far from the nominal it modifies, Greek speakers don't see this as ambiguous because there's only one nominal that kakou agrees with, and so it's clear by that agreement that it's a wicked people, not a wicked son, not wicked Apollonius. Another job that adjectives can do is they can become substantive. A substantive adjective is now being used as if it were a nominal. In other words, a substantive word. In other words, it's not modifying or describing another word. It's identifying a person or thing with the particular attribute that it describes. So, ha agathos is not just the good, it's the good man. Now, how do we know it's a good man? Because the masculine form of the adjective has been used. So the gender of the substantive adjective follows or matches the gender of the actual thing you're describing, thing you're talking about. Similarly, he agathe would be the good woman, or ta agathon would be the good thing, or sometimes just goodness, the principle of goodness. What signs can we look for that an adjective is being used substantively? The main thing is to look for a definite article out in front. If you see a definite article in front of an adjective, and there's no other nominal that that article is going with, you can be fairly sure that what you've got is a substantive adjective. Not the good something, but the good man. Also, you want to make sure that there's no other nominal that the adjective is agreeing with, because if there is, it is fairly likely that the adjective is being used attributively. At the very least, it's unclear. But if you have a article out in front of the adjective, and the adjective doesn't agree with any nominal in the sentence, then you're fairly clear that this is a substantive adjective, an adjective that's acting like a noun. There are a few irregular adjectives that unfortunately are quite common, but at least that means we'll get used to them. One is pas, and this is irregular simply because it uses different declensions in different genders. So for the masculine and neuter, we use third declension endings, and for the feminine, we use first declension endings. Sometimes we'll call this a 3-1-3 adjective. Third declension, first declension, third declension. But the forms actually, once we learn the nominative forms, are quite regular third declension forms. In the masculine and neuter, where we're dealing with third declension, the real stem is pant, and so we have for the masculine pas, but then pant os, pas again for the vocative, and in the nominative, straightforward third declension endings, pantes, panton, pantes. Similarly for the neuter, pan in the nominative, but then pantos in the genitive, and in the plural, panta, panton, and panta. For the feminine first declension forms, we use a different stem. We use the pas stem instead of the pant stem. And with 3-1-3 adjectives, this is a fairly common pattern, that the stem is slightly different in the feminine. This is not unlike hutos, haute, tuta, where the real stems are tut, tout for the feminine, and tut again for the neuter. The feminine often gets its own form of the stem. But that form of the stem is visible right in the nominative singular, passa. And so we then just use the regular first declension endings. Passa, passas, passa in the vocative. In the plural, passai, passon, passai. So this isn't tricky once you realize that we're dealing with a 3-1-3 adjective. Things are a little bit easier with the adjective polis, which means many or much. The basic stem of polis is actually pol with a double lambda, p omicron lambda lambda. And in most of its forms, polis just adds the regular first and second declension nominal endings onto that pol stem. But as you can see from the nominative masculine singular form that we use to refer to the adjective, we do occasionally see this irregular form polus, with one lambda instead of two lambdas, and an upsilon connecting vowel instead of the usual omicron. This is just irregular, and you just have to remember it. It appears in the nominative masculine singular, polus, and in the neuter nominative singular, polu. And since the neuter uses the same form for the nominative and vocative, you have polu in the vocative neuter singular as well. What you have to remember then is just that the form we use usually to refer to this adjective, polus, is the irregular form. And if you can remember the three nominative forms, that'll help. Polus, polle, with the double lambda, pollu. Another irregular adjective is megas. And similarly to what we just saw, it's irregular in the nominative masculine singular and the neuter masculine singular. And again, it's irregular primarily because parts of the stem are left off in those two forms, and also because we have an unusual connecting vowel. So the lambda from the megal stem is dropped off, and the alpha of the end of the megal stem ends up acting as if it's the connecting vowel. So we get megas, and similarly in the neuter, mega. But if you remember, again, those nominative forms, megas, megale, mega, then once again in the feminine we see the true stem of the adjective, megal, and you can use that for all of the other forms using regular second declension and first declension endings. So the genitive masculine singular is megalou. In the plural masculine we have megaloi, megalone, megaloi, etc. There are a few special neuter plural forms of certain adjectives that we should point out because they play such a common role. Neuter plural adjectives are often used as substantives, and some of these are treated sometimes as substantive even though there's no article. Most often this is with some of these irregular adjectives. So the neuter plural form of pas is panta, and this is often used as a substantive even without the article, meaning everything or all things. Similarly, the neuter plural pola often means many things, even without the article. You can see the article with these. It can be ta panta or ta pola for everything or many things, but you don't need the article there. This same phenomenon can also happen with other adjectives. So sometimes kala, from kalos, can mean good things, even if it's not ta kala with the article. But you'll most often see this with panta and pola. You can learn more about Greek adjectives and their uses in Mounce's Basics of Biblical Greek. And again, I've given you the section numbers and page numbers for Mounce's third edition. Remember that Mounce discusses all of the cases together when he discusses adjectives. Don't worry yet, though, about the accusative or dative forms that he discusses. We're going to get to those in a little while.